coming in now. So hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm really excited. My name is Michelle Sanchez. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of Admissions and Enrollment here at Northwest School. And I'm so excited. We have such a star team today who's going to talk a little bit about our humanities program, 6 through 12. And without further ado, a couple of things for business purposes. There is a Q&A button here. So at the end of the presentation, we will open it up to questions and answers. So we hope to be presenting for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we will open it up for questions. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and let Tamara introduce herself.
Hi. Thanks, Michelle. I'm hearing a little bit of an echo, so I'm hoping that you're not. But if you are, just let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to plug ahead. My name is Tamara Bunnell. I teach 7th grade humanities at Northwest. I'm also one of the co-coordinators of the department this year, and I have been at Northwest for 26 years. So, and that's always been in the middle school. I've bounced back and forth between 7th and 8th grade, and so it's a program I really love, and I'm happy to share with you about. What I'm going to do is just give you a really quick overview, including a little bit about our approach. I'll share with you some things that happen at each of the middle school grade levels, and then I'll turn things over to the upper school team. But just to start, a couple things to know. Humanities is an integrated double course at Northwest. So that means that we kind of mesh together what you would traditionally think of as language arts and social studies. Really kind of everything is under those broader categories of reading and writing, but within that we're blending in research and tech and creative components and things like that. But really anything that we're studying is related to the history or geographical components is going to be reflected in the literature that we're choosing as well, doing that all at the same time, really just with the goal that that's kind of the way our brains work, right? So we believe and have seen evidence that just really helps us get to that deeper learning. It's also a double course, so students have sorry, I'm not quite ready for this slide yet, Michelle, but we'll get to this in just a minute. But so students get 2 credits for humanities, and they see us twice as much as their other teachers. And then just one other quick thing before we launch into 6th grade, is that I just forgot what I was going to say. I was just saying earlier, I'm a little discombobulated this morning. It's a core course is what I was going to say. So until the students get into the 12th grade, each grade level that they experience is something that they're experiencing together with their classmates in a designed course that they all experience versus a series of electives. Okay, thanks, Michelle, for your patience. All right, let's look at 6th grade. So just very quickly, I wanted to share some of the projects that students do and some of the reading that they might encounter at each of the grade levels. The theme for 6th grade is individuals and community. 6th grade is really distinctive because this is when we're bringing in our first, it's the first year that they're experiencing together. They're creating their own community together as a class, becoming part of the Northwest School community. And so you can see here some of the things that they do and some of the things that they read, but a lot of the work is looking at what is their own experience, what is their own lens, who are they as individuals, and how does that inform how they experience the broader community and how they can contribute to that. In 7th grade, this is where we take things to a regional level. So 7th grade is the year when students are going to get their official Washington State history material. But we really just focus a lot on the Northwest, but of course, Northwest history really can never be separated from national history or world history or any of that. So I would say one thing that's distinctive about 7th grade is we focus a lot on primary sources and the history and bring in a lot of research components, move away a little bit from creative writing, which they do a lot of in the 6th grade, more to expository writing. And then in the 8th grade, what we do is broaden that scope even further. So the theme of 8th grade is world geography and literature. That is a broad stripe, of course. So our 8th grade team tends to focus on a few different regions with the time they have. Right now, that is Africa, Latin America, with a focus on the Dominican Republic and Southwest Asia. 8th grade is distinctive too. It ends with a media analysis unit. So students look a lot at social media and advertising and things like that, which is where the the dystopia stories come in there at the end. So I know that's super brief, but hopefully that gives you just a little taste of middle school, and any further questions I think we can get at today. But of course, you can always reach out to me as the middle school department coordinator directly, or through Michelle if you have additional questions that we don't cover today.
Right, I think that means I'm
Yes.
Yes, okay, so upper school humanities. First, my name's Isaac Meyer. I use he, him pronouns, and this is my 5th year at Northwest, which is a real striking realization to have all of a sudden. But so upper school humanities continues in the form of a lot of what Tamara's talked about. It is also a core course, so at least 9th, 10th, and 11th grade students are taking in a given grade level the same course taught by a team of teachers who are following broadly a similar outline for the year. We don't go, there's some variation based on who you're with, but we're teaching the same units. We have the same big projects. We hit kind of the same milestones and the same skills. And it is intended to cover what you traditionally think of, again, as an English class and a history class or a social studies class. There's 3 major structures through which we teach that. The first are larger group lectures, intended to mimic a lot of what you see at the collegiate level in terms of practicing content delivery. We use those for framing material often, not just saying, oh, we're here to talk about World War II, but here is the context and the lens through which we'll approach World War II, for example. The next level, so to speak of, is the individual section, usually around 14 to 18 kids. That's what I see in my sections. Where you'll have kind of the group discussions, where you'll spend most of your time, and then finally one-on-one conferences with teachers. And in terms of the content we cover, 9 through 11 is a sort of world history sequence, roughly 9th grade being kind of ancient through what we'd call medieval history, which I'll talk about right now. I taught 9 for my first 2 years at Northwest, and it's a really fun year to teach for 2 reasons. First, we get to cover some history the kids are just not that familiar with, and so it's really, really interesting to do. It's usually what you'd call the ancient classical medieval history. And you get to do things like read Greek dramas like Antigone with them, and that's always so much fun when we get to the end and everyone dies and the kids get kind of surprised by that. It's always a good time. Or the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is just tremendously fun to teach with 9th graders. So in terms of the content, it's a really interesting period to teach. And skill-wise, it's really fun because the students come in at a couple of, in some different places. We get about half of our kids on average from the middle school, but it is smaller as a unit than the upper school is. So we get a lot of kids from other schools too. And it's a fun process to build a cohesive community through 9th grade out of that, where they all start off in very different places, but end ready to move into 10th grade. And I mean, it's just I have to say, I was really lucky to be able to teach 9 coming in. I really, really enjoyed getting to work with the kids, kind of helping them get used to the institution as I was getting used to the institution, taking them from very basic, let's talk about how a 5-paragraph essay works to get you ready moving forward, to talking about Shakespeare by the end of the year and having them, again, be very sad when everyone dies, which I guess is kind of a theme in 9th grade. But yeah, it's skill building and building that kind of basic context of the history to then pass the students on to 10.
Which is the grade that I get to teach. Hi, my name is Harumi, or Harmi. Either pronunciation is good. I currently teach 10th and 12th grade, but I have taught 9, 10, 11, and 12 in my, I think this is 13th year here. I know. So I love 10th grade. Sorry, I'm getting a little, if I'm too loud, you might want to turn the volume down. I love getting to build on what the 9th grade team teaches, because we really start to look at 1600 all the way up to the eve of World War I. So it's a pretty big span of time, but nothing like what Isaac was just talking about. And so we get to focus more on the building of the modern world. And it's a high focus on US history, which 11th grade continues. But we also get to build on all the skills that Isaac was also mentioning. So thank you for all the work that you do to get us to our 10th graders. So high focus, we begin with looking at West Africa in the 1600s, 1700s, as we're seeing the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade. And this year, as we've done in a couple other previous years, we read Homegoing, which is a difficult text, both in terms of content and on a literary level. But the students just gobbled it up and said resoundingly, yes, please have students read this again. I really enjoyed it, even in the context of online learning, which was such a delight and a joy to get to see them still excited about school and excited about reading, particularly in this time. And so then we move on to the foundations of modern Western civilization, some of which is the self-styled Enlightenment, even though the rest of the world had basically become so-called enlightened and had scientific advances in universities and things, hundreds of years before. So we're looking back to some of what we'd studied in 9th grade and then bring that more into the modern era. So as you can see, some of the other topics are much more US history focused, which is very much in alignment with Washington State, what's commonly taught across Washington State in 10th grade, but with a lens of looking at different perspective and not just strictly from the white male gaze. So for example, we got to do this in-depth civics unit. Michelle, you're gonna have to cut me off because I could just go on forever. So we just did a civics unit during the election season, which was wild. And so we'd had all these topics that, how do you look at 3 branches of government? How does this come from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and what was co-opted? What comes from Montesquieu, Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau? And then how are things being applied? And so we had some intense, wonderful conversations about the Electoral College and how that does and doesn't serve us today, how it can be an antiquated system, and yet, how do checks and balances actually work now? What are some of the loopholes to power today? And how was that set up initially? So that's just kind of a little bit of where we're at now. Right now we're studying revolutions and looking at some 19th century revolutions and bringing that to some contemporary revolutions. And then next we're going to be looking at poetry during the Romantic era, which I'm so excited about. So all this to say, and you can see some of the other texts and things that we do. I should note that while we've, and I don't want to speak for every grade level, but at least I know at the upper school, a lot of these texts we have done over the years, and a lot of that has also changed, or sometimes we'll do excerpts depending on the needs of the students, their energy levels, and what needs to be changed for online. So I'm really, I just wanted to let you know, I would love to promise we're doing these exact same things next year, but also pedagogy shifts, and we really try to be aware of how pedagogy shifts both for the online learning piece and for students where they're at today. They're in a very different spot than they were when I started teaching at the school 13 years ago. And so we're really trying to align our practices with who is in the classroom and in our families. So yeah, 11th grade, Curtis.
Yeah, Humanities 11. Thanks, Harmony. I really appreciate that. I want to start by introducing myself. My name is Curtis Isayasu. I go by he, him pronouns, and this is my first year teaching at the Northwest School. And I want to say right off the bat that it's been a pure joy professionally and just personally getting to work with this team of committed teachers, getting to know these folks that you've already heard from. You might imagine it's a weird year to start a new job at a school, but I have felt very welcome by my colleagues and really inspired by the innovative, creative curriculum that you're seeing kind of unfold before you here today. It's a real delight to be a part of that. And I'm happy to kind of talk about what we do in 11th grade. So 11th grade, Humanities 11 really focuses, continues the track that has been set up in 9th and 10th grade. In this class, we focus up even more in order to take a deep dive into the 20th century, which is already enough material, right, that it's really hard to get through. I look back at some of the other classes, I'm like, wow, 18th and 19th century. Oh, we can barely get through the 20th century. But one of the ways too that I think we're trying to build on a lot of the work that's been done in the 9th and 10th grade, really throughout the entire humanities track here. Starting in middle school is to kind of take things up to the next level and really focus a little bit more on a curriculum that encourages a little bit more kind of independent inquiry from students, gets them thinking about asking and kind of thinking about their own questions and their own kind of ways of entering into a much larger kind of academic, scholarly kind of inquiry into the period. One of the ways that we do that is by setting up a series of kind of overarching scholarly inquiry questions. And in this case, in this year, we've chosen to kind of orient everything through the lens of like the rise of various types of nationalisms and internationalisms, with some kind of sub-questions around the role of ideologies of race, gender, and class in the formation of those different visions of the world. And what those questions allow us to do is dive into a variety of different case studies of events and different issues that have emerged across the 20th century, and really be asking the same questions so that students are learning how to inhabit these questions and figure out how to find their own interests within them. It also means that we can shift gears a lot. So whether we're talking about World War I, which we got through in this first trimester, which is, you know, of course, a massive global event, to something like the Harlem Renaissance, which is, you know, something that took place in a very small little neighborhood of Manhattan. Regardless of the kind of scale and scope of the kind of case study, the event or issue that we're looking at, students can really still be asking these same questions and learning how to think about those questions, think about the role, for instance, of nationalism and internationalism at a variety of different scales, from the personal to the global, and in a variety of different geographical contexts. So we make our way through the 20th century again, kind of trying to switch up and give students a lot of different opportunities to study events, both big and small, from the progressive era, World War I, World War II. We spent a little bit of time on, we just finished up a unit on Japanese incarceration in the West Coast during World War II, moving on to the Holocaust. We'll spend some time on the rise of China, the Cold War in the United States, of course. And at the end of this, students are going to get the opportunity to design their own kind of research projects within the boundaries of that larger inquiry that we've talked about. So a lot of this is gearing them up in order to take the reins, design their own kind of inquiries with the experience they've had kind of maneuvering and creating analysis through these questions that we've been asking all year long. So that's kind of that move at the end of this long sequence towards students really getting to see themselves as scholars and to ask their own questions and provide their own answers and really take the reins of their humanities education at this point. I think that that's kind of what I want to say about Humanities 11. I'm glad to answer more questions along the line. And now we switch over to Humanities 12, which is a completely different thing. I think I'm going to turn things over to Isaac just to give a general.
Sure, yeah, I can do that. So Humanities 12 is unique in that this is the point where we return to a model that's a little bit more what the students are likely to encounter at the collegiate level. So we split humanities back into two tracks. One that is social studies oriented, closer to what you'd see in a history course, and another that's literature and writing, closer to English language, language arts. The thinking there, again, really being to A, more closely mimic the college experience, and B, give the students more of a voice now, a choice in where they want to go. They've got the skills, the preparation to move forward, and now they can take those skills into an area of interest for them. In terms of the electives themselves, you can see a list of the current ones here in both tracks. For social studies, there's also a shared component related to civics, including a study of the US Constitution, and a kind of concurrent project that involves doing volunteer work either for an NGO or for a political campaign, because we do it during the election season. And it's actually a very interesting project. I would say more so during non-major election years, because you get kids volunteering for city council races, for example. I've had a lot of those before. And they really get to see how local politics works and get a feel for how these kind of big picture civics concepts play out at the local level. But that project is always really fascinating, and I've read some truly amazing ones in my day. And then the other shared component for social studies at the very end of the year is a research paper where, again, the topic varies a little bit based, the choice of what they're doing varies a bit based on the exact elective they're in, but the general idea is preparation along the lines of what you'd expect of a more traditional like collegiate term paper, kind of that sort of framing of preparing them for what they're going to do in college. So that's basically how the electives work. And actually, Curtis and Harmy both teach in that track, so I'm sure there are things I forgot to say. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Isaac. I think there is a lot of these courses, these two tracks, the students will pick their top few courses in each track, and then the registrar will figure out that matrix. And I wanted to say that throughout the 9, 10, 11 sequence, there's choice for different topics. There's, do you need or want to practice more creative writing and expository writing, etc., or research projects. Even the 11th grade research project, generally there's a lot of choice even within that. So just the notion of choice is not restricted to the 12th grade by any means. And that being said, it is also a joy to get to work with seniors. Even when they're done with that college process, they're still excited to learn because like, oh, I get to deep dive into this topic. So yeah, the literature and writing track, as you can see, there's quite a variety in both tracks. And, so these courses may change, again, according to student need, desire, and faculty who are on staff and our own specialties. But as you can see, there's anywhere from philosophy to some creative writing courses to and beyond. I would say all of these, there's a high focus on critical reading, critical writing skills, often creative writing in some form or another, whether it's persuasive or literally creative writing, which also, again, is such a joy to get to see them explore beyond just that personal essay that most of them tend to write for colleges. A lot of them are only familiar with that kind of writing, and we've done bits throughout the last few years, but this really allows us to do a deep dive into that as a culminating experience. So yeah, Curtis, anything else that you would add?
No, I think you both have covered it really well. I mean, I think for me and the way that I tend to think of these classes is about, amplifying too. It's that last step before the college experience. And so that smaller seminar where students are really given, I think, a little bit more responsibility for carrying the discussions and driving the analysis that is being presented to them, and getting the opportunity again to work, I think, in a maybe a slightly more specific topic than they might be used to, which again is going to be something that they're going to encounter at the college level, is really apropos for the curriculum. And it's my experience teaching for the first time this year has been just getting to just benefit from the fruits of the labor of all of my colleagues here that you've talked about in terms of what these students are capable of doing in a seminar where they're given all of that choice and how far that they can fly. And especially when you're working with a smaller group of students, you get the opportunity really to promote individual goals and differentiated learning so that every student, whether they're the most experienced writer and the most fantastic essayist, or really just still kind of struggling, right, with to kind of, craft those kind of cohesive arguments, you can really push them to the next level. And that's the joy of getting to work in these smaller senior classes. So.
Yeah. I'm going to just do one more note. I know Isaac had talked about the notion of conferences being something that we offer. I mean, I think that's basically offered in any class anywhere. All teachers are happy to meet one-on-one or in small groups with their students. Just speaking for myself, I think, frankly, a lot of my colleagues, some of the favorite parts of our day is when we get to do those one-on-ones in small groups with students. That being said, I've noticed particularly this year, I've had both more one-on-ones with students and fewer. Just because sometimes we just go through phases where we're done with screen time. So again, some of that may change. But in person, we're always happy to have those one-on-ones or obviously on screen. Sometimes we require them. Sometimes we want, especially at the upper school, we want to have students practice the art of being proactive and asking for that. And we, as you may know, we offer office hours a couple of times a week, and we're always happy to schedule during free periods or before and after school as needed, again, depending on different people's schedules. But I just wanted to let you know how conferences can vary depending on the situation.
Oh my gosh, thank you all so much. I miss not being able to drop into your classes and just to kind of be a fly in the wall. I mean, I know I can do it in the Zoom world, but it's certainly not the same. And so thank you. So I encourage all of us, our audience, to send questions. I see I have a first one here about, hold on, my chat's not opening here. Okay. Well, we have an alum in the audience who says, I adored my 9th grade humanities class in 1980. This all sounds so good. I'm thinking about how I could show up as an imposter student and take these classes. So in-person time, how often do students have the one-on-one conference small section lecture?
I can take that, sure.
Yeah.
So in terms of lecture to start with, that's usually around like once, for at least, it depends on the year, I would say, but for 11, it's once a unit or twice a unit. So like probably once every 2 weeks or 2 times every 3 weeks, depending on the unit we're in. Again, the intent we really use them for is kind of framing a discussion, and sometimes for content delivery, but we tried to kind of do less of that just because the class time we have with the students, we want to dedicate more of it to the small sections, which is the vast majority of the time that we have with the students. And then one-on-one conferences, it really can vary quite a bit when they have a big project going on, like the research paper for 11. Then you get a lot of one-on-one time with the kids. When it's calmer times, then it's a bit less, but it really varies based on the needs of where we're at as a group. And I see there's a question about the projects students do in non-election years. Harmy can probably help me out with this one, but I remember city council being a big one, mayoral races being a big one.
Yeah, or like I think you were saying, NGOs or nonprofits. So like NARAL was one. Big Table, Sound Foundations. I mean, a lot of beautiful local organizations that are doing work on the ground. And so they, get to help out with that. This year I had a couple of students who are working at the Daybreak Star Center. We've had people who are working with United Way. There are ways for them to engage either electronically, or if they and their families felt comfortable, then they would do a social distancing COVID version to help out, that masked and sanitized and all of that. So yeah, feel free to ask a follow-up question if there's more on that. Yeah, and to go back to the conferences idea, that really has varied over the years. I would say the offering that teachers have of like, hey, pretty much any time you need or want to meet within reason, not every day, but within reason, we're happy to meet with you. And sometimes that's been required, sometimes that doesn't. Sometimes it just depends on the schedule that we have or the circumstances that the school has. So yeah.
Can I jump in just a little bit? It's because I want to clarify there are some ways in which our approach in middle school and upper school is different. So just to clarify, I would say in middle school, we do not rely very much on lecture format. There are times when we will present information in that way. So for example, we're studying the Chinese Exclusion Act right now and the events that led up to that in the 7th grade. And there are times where we will use a PowerPoint or, more of a teacher talk kind of format. Part of that is because a lot of what we want out of our materials isn't always represented in a standard textbook. And so we utilize different sources to bring in, different historical lenses and voices and experiences. Sorry, my cat is nudging me. My TA is here, distracting me a little bit. But so there's a little bit of that, but I think for just for context, in terms of our academic approach in humanities for middle school, we're more project-based, and yet that doesn't mean there's still not the one-on-one time. Depending on our schedule, which is a little bit different right now with remote learning, we have a study hall and office hour program built into each different grade level. So there is a lot of time for students to meet one-on-one or get that one-on-one help if they need it. It's not structured in the same way as the upper school writing conferences. So just wanted to throw that out there in case you're looking at one of the earlier grades.
Yeah, I wanted to say actually one more thing about lecture is that can also look at different at upper school too. Sometimes it's a really traditional, like 60 minutes, sometimes we'll give them the break in between just so their brains can reset. But for instance, tomorrow I'm lecturing, co-lecturing actually with a dear colleague of mine on the French Revolution, told through the story of art. So, and political cartoons from that era. So we're looking at primary sources that are visual, and also talking through the art. And it's kind of a glorified section or a glorified classroom, because we'll be talking, but then we'll be like, okay, your turn, pop into the chat. What are you noticing in this piece of art? What's in the foreground? What's in the background? Like who, you know, what do you think these figures are? So there's a mix. So it's not just a sage on the stage type of thing. There's, and like Tamara was saying, for upper school too, we want to model what it means to be scholars and to be looking at a whole bunch of sources. And what my colleague and I are attempting to do tomorrow is to actually do the exact project that the students are required to do, which is to research a contemporary revolution or uprising or grassroots movement that's happened or been happening for the last few years, and do a short presentation on it based on the media of that time. So, there's multiple skills that are being built in, and so my colleague Robin and I are going to be showing what they're supposed to be doing, presenting on next week. So it's a lecture, but kind of not, kind of.
Great, thank you. Anyone else have any questions or comments or anything we can kind of clarify with the time that we have left? And we also recognize that everyone is so exhausted. I really, my heart goes out to all the families that are going through this process, and I can't imagine how much more fatigued you are all having to be on Zoom so much more. So, you know, the goal here is to really be able to provide, you know, some more detailed information that we couldn't necessarily do in the larger open house, and to really put the face with the name of our just extraordinary faculty who has just done an incredible job from the spring and on in pivoting and providing so much additional support and keeping the love of learning, you know, the joy still. Like I hear from our students how they still feel so connected and still feel that joy coming from all of you. There's a question that's popped up now. How is the access to teachers of these classes by the kids during quarantine versus live or in person? Tackle that one. Oh.
I keep muting myself because of the meowing cat. Well, our classes are live, and so we're teaching through Zoom. I'm not sure if I'm understanding the question correctly, but we are, you know, classes are all together for the most part. We do have some asynchronous classes for our international students and a few variations depending on the student, but most of our domestic students are in classes live with their classmates and their teachers. Oh, and assistance too. I think we have office hours and different times built into the day where we can schedule a one-on-one or a small group meeting or additional time with our students in that live context. Although honestly, some students, and maybe I'm speaking as a middle school teacher now, kids can be a little bit nervous about even in this remote setting with the one-on-one. So we operate with a learning management system called Canvas, and we have email. So students who prefer to just shoot us a question for help, often we'll do that too. So there are a few different avenues they can choose.
I can respond to that a little bit too, because I think, you know, that it is a change, and it's an adjustment that we as teachers have had to make and as students have had to make. I think that it's worth saying, and you know, we're all, I think, looking forward to a moment where we'll be back in the building and back in the classrooms that we're used to. I myself have never actually been in the building, so I'm really looking forward to that. But you know, one of the things I think has been a difference in distance learning is, of course, we are available, as Tamara has said. We have office hours. Students will often stay after class and ask questions on Zoom. And of course, email is the main thing that we're all, like, frankly, spending much time on, I think, during this time where we're working remotely, not only from the students, but from each other as well. And I think that it is something we're saying that like students have had to adjust to that, and we've had to adjust to helping the students work through that. It requires a little bit more self-advocacy for a student to kind of get on email or set up an appointment or something like that, or come to office hours, when in the past they might have just been able to like poke their head in the door or walk down the hall or catch us as we're making our way to lunch or something like that in order to ask their questions. And I myself have already figured out, that's something, and we talked about this too in some of our meetings, that this is something that you actually need to like help students understand how to do. It's a new, like more mature level of self-advocacy. And so this is one of the ways that we're trying to stay really present with the students and try to support them throughout all of these shifting circumstances and be flexible, that I've had to like, do a little bit of like training and stuff like that around like email and when it's appropriate and how it's what's like the good best practices for it and those types of things. So it's been an adjustment. I want to acknowledge the question as being one that is like, I've been really, I think, proud of how flexible and how responsive we've been able to be, but it has been a shift and adjustment for ourselves and for the students. We're doing our best.
I want to say there is one tiny bonus to Zoom that I really appreciate. There have been times when I could tell I need or want to check in with a student, or they want to check in with me. And the beauty is I just create a new breakout room, even in the middle of class. And it's like, hey, let's just go hang out here. And it's completely private. Nobody can hear. Nobody even really knows because they're in their own breakout room. So I just, I know it's easy to be like, Zoom school stinks. And yet there's, privacy is not the right, maybe privacy is that they can in some ways have a conversation that is actually a little bit more private in some ways. And so I've actually really appreciated in some students who aren't used to advocating for themselves in person, for whom taking that physical step, like Curtis was saying, the poke your head, in the door and say, hey, can you meet, is harder. This sometimes is easier, or because Zoom also has that chat. I mean, we're not on online school forever, right? But Zoom does have that chat function that's private. And so I have kids who are chatting with me like throughout the classroom. I almost can't keep up sometimes, but I love that because then they're practicing that self-advocacy skill in a way that's pretty low stakes. So I've seen actually more reaching out in some cases from students that I wasn't expecting to see that from this early in the year.
And I'll add that while we want to see self-advocacy, we also know that not every student is there yet. So again, thinking very much about the younger grades in particular, but I would say this is true for individual students across our program, that we have an advisory program, we have really strong grade level teams, we have a great channel of communication. So we are not just sitting around waiting for a student who's struggling to self-advocate. If there is a need for that extra support, there's going to be a teacher, there's going to be somebody that reaches out both to the student and possibly the family, if that's the best communication too. We don't expect them all to just have that, when they come in. It's a lot of the skill set that we're teaching.
Yeah, and this is where a partnership with families, I think, is so key, because I really appreciated a student may seem like they're fine in terms of what they're turning in, how they show up, but what they show at home isn't always the same thing, right? Or maybe they really are fine during school and they realize, oh shoot, actually I do need some support. So I really appreciate when there have been parents who have been said, hey, I'm just noticing something, do you mind checking in? And I'm like, absolutely, thank you for letting me know. They seemed fine when I have checked in with them. But we all see different sides, or it goes both ways too. I will sometimes reach out to parents when I'm, having a wonder.
Great. So this question is, I'm really impressed to hear about the way your teaching approach is pointed in the direction of getting ready for college level study. Can you talk at all about how that pedagogy transitions from 9 to 12?
I mean, this is going to sound so basic, but just truly one step at a time. I mean, I as somebody who's taught mostly 10th and 12th grade for a really long time, I kind of see them throughout, and I've often taught the same students. And so I feel like I get to build on 9th grade, which is teaching reading, writing, critical thinking, analysis, close reading, political cartoon analysis, who knows what, research, etc. And they build those foundations. And then at 10th grade, I feel like I can, okay, let's do some review. And then now let's push that a little bit. Let's get that to 10th grade style. And then it just keeps building from there, which I think is basically the pedagogy of most decent to great teachers anyway. But yeah, we're all pretty aware, I think, of what are the skills that are being taught at each level. And then, where, for instance, topic sentences are something that I hammer in 10th grade. I don't do that quite as much in 9th grade because they're just trying to get a sense for what is my big idea here? What's the thesis? And if we get there, great. But in 10th grade, I know I can push them more into like, okay, now be really clear with what you're saying at the beginning of that paragraph. And how do we be more concise? How do you play around with syntax?
Another thing that I think is really actually very much a part of the innovative nature of this integrated humanities curriculum. In the 9th grade, students are really introduced to a variety of different lenses or rubrics for like understanding the world. That really comes across what we traditionally think of as disciplines that you would get in separate spaces if you had an English and a history class. They talk about how any given kind of moment or different kind of text can be viewed for the political, the economic, the cultural, the social, and break that out in these ways that is, I think, really interesting and lays a great foundation for all of the rest of the grades that are kind of doing that work. And that's, a lot of what it means to kind of to think in a more advanced way when students get to a college level, to be able to kind of say, okay, what lens am I adopting here now, right? What in this economics class that I'm in, what's different about how I need to like do this work and think about, we might be studying some of the same historical moments that I'm studying in my political science class, but I have to adopt a different lens to it. And I think that kind of, I guess, focus on analysis is something else that I see building out throughout the curriculum towards that kind of 12th grade and college level kind of stuff where, you're doing that analysis all throughout. By the time we get to 11th grade, right, we're doing a research project where we're asking students to not just kind of do research in the sense that they're going to go out and like learn about something, but that they're actually going to find scholarship that they have to kind of respond to, right? Actual published scholarship. That's a pretty advanced skill, honestly. I taught at the college level myself. Many of us have for quite a while, and there's not a lot of freshmen that come in with the ability or even any kind of experience doing that work. So from that level and from that perspective, I would say that there's a really great set of scaffolded skills for students, both at just the base, I think the skills level, which is what Harmy really talked about, reading, writing, but also like I think conceptual and even like what I would refer to as methodological thinking levels, where students are being introduced to what it means to do, to ask questions and to think critically in all of these different domains and have agency within that too, to say, you know what, I want to study this, and this is the lens that I want to use to look at it, and this is the scholarship that I'm going to engage, and actually I can actually say something that none of the rest of these scholars are saying. That's a really empowering thing for students, and I think we're building on that. By the time we get to 12th grade, you're really building on that sense of empowerment, which I think is important for those self-advocating college students that students need to do when they head off to a big university.
Or even I have no idea where I want to start, but I've got the skills to be able to get going.
Well, if no one else has any more questions, I want to thank Isaac, Curtis, Harumi, and Tamara for taking, just like I said, it's hard for me to ask one more thing from this amazing faculty because you're pouring it all into your students. But it's really important to be able to showcase all the incredible work that is happening at our school, even remotely. So thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon. Please know that you can reach me and admissions at any time. We're getting close to the application deadline, which is January 14th. So please let us know if there's anything that you need to help you kind of make that final leap to apply to our school. And we're here and available. So thank you all. Wish you all a wonderful rest of your day and afternoon. And thank you, team. You're awesome.
Thank you all for coming.
Okay.
Thanks so much. We hope to see you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you,
all.
everybody.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.